Frank Lloyd Wright was one of those early modernist architects that was really ahead of his time and didn't even realize it. He just wanted to do something a little bit different. He originally worked for Louis Sullivan, and his architectural work is generally characterized by cantilevers, which you would see on the exterior of falling water with the horizontal applications of the architecture there. And basically, that was mass opposed to void. He tended to build from the inside out, and similar to Charles René Mackintosh from the Art Nouveau period, um, they were really considered the pioneers of modernism. Now, Prairie House design was influenced by traditional Japanese design, as well as nature and, of course, the arts and crafts movement. Now, the arts and crafts movement, as you will recall from the other recording, is that they went back to handmade items. They valued custom pieces as opposed to objects that were mass produced in the Industrial Revolution. So with the prairie style houses, the attributes are horizontal lines, which were meant to represent the prairies. There is a lot of asymmetry in the design, which represented the irregularity of nature. Very low pitched roofs, wide overhanging eaves, again that cantilever idea. Very little ornament, concealed entrances, and Frank Lloyd Wright really liked to design for empathy of the site. So in this case, because he was based in Chicago, he built a lot of flat houses or buildings with horizontal emphasis to replicate the flat prairies of the Midwest. Now, sticking with the vernacular from the area, a lot of the furniture that we see on the interiors were made out of oak because that's what was readily available in the Midwest. And like Mackintosh, he developed tall chairs that were intended to be screens around the table. Large, heavy pieces were never intended to be mass produced, so everything was custom. And often he wouldn't even take a commission to build a residence for the wealthy unless the furniture was in the contract, because he was concerned with the interior reflecting his intent of the exterior. And he wanted to create a complete environment as well. Fireplaces would often be the focal point of the home, but the chimney was short as to not disturb those horizontal lines. He favored geometric shapes, and again, this is around a time that Art Nouveau is really popular as well. So those hard lines in the geometric shapes created a different aesthetic during that time. He not only designed stained glass, but he also designed light fixtures and textiles that would be included in his commission. For example, in Roby House, he actually designed Mrs. Roby's entertainment wear so that she would coordinate with the interior as well. Now, this is a very rectilinear style that we're seeing here in these images, and that opposes everything that the Victorian excessiveness was about and the Art Nouveau organic forms were perpetrating. He received many commissions for his furniture as well. The two Midway chairs that you see here were designed for a park called Midway Gardens, which is in the central area of Chicago. And they were intended for outdoor garden courts, so obviously made out of steel. And again, that use of geometric shape to really create his design aesthetic. Frank Lloyd Wright was also credited with designing the first metal office furniture. The pieces that you see here were built by Steelcase. Steelcase is a very large furniture manufacturer, office furniture manufacturer that you'll become very, very familiar with as an interior designer. And he built them to color coordinate with the S.C. Johnson & Son Administration Building in Wisconsin. So that circular shape we see again within the chair and carried throughout the desk was also reflected in the interior and exterior of the architecture of the SC Johnson & Son building. I would definitely star this slide. This barrel chair generally ends up on the exam. Very popular, designed for the Herbert Johnson House and built by Copeland Furniture. Originally this chair was obviously done in oak, but the company has actually reissued this chair in a cherry wood and walnut, and again meant to coordinate with the aesthetic of the home. It's developed as a potential divider if you need it to be, but it also has that lower back, so it does create a flow of space throughout the Herbert Johnson House as well. Now, although Frank Lloyd Wright is definitely furiously designing things that are quite modern, it's really the Art Deco period that was the first style that was popular in America, which totally broke away from traditional forms. At the time, they called it Art Moderne, so M-O-D-E-R-N-E. So aesthetically, it married the industry of art, architecture, and design with industrial designed objects as well, so that there was no harshness of earlier modern designs. A really popular influence during this time was, of course, the Titanic.
We see a lot of stylized geometry.
So
again, really
became a
lines
fascination
with zigzags,
with the transportation
bolts,
industry and the lines of fan-shaped cars, etc. The discovery of King Tut's tomb,
and although it had the
an
spirit of a
Egyptian
modernized
revival
world
as well,
so we see again
they really still handcrafted their objects,
geometry taken
and
from that
still
era.
employed the
Zigzag
skill
shapes
of
were thought to
beneaths,
relate to electricity
that were
and
brought
radio.
back.
Because
So there's
those
a
were the
small
symbols
hint
of the modern
of
world
classicism
and something that
with the
had
use
become
of
tropical
accessible
woods,
by the
inlay
general
of
public,
woods.
ivory and metal. The entrance lobby of the Strand Palace Hotel in London is a really great example of that stylized geometry. We have almost like a ziggurat stepped, illuminated element to the stairs. A lot of use of electricity because, again, that became status quo. We see a zigzag or stepped arch form on the left-hand side of the image, and again that simple geometric line on the doors as well at the top of the staircase. So everything is glamorous and shiny. Fashion is the same. It's replicating the transportation industry, and we can see that beautiful Bugatti motor car on the left-hand side. The best example of the sunburst shape, as well as that ziggurat stepped pyramid-like construction in the modern age, is the Chrysler Building in New York. Even though it does have some Gothic elements to it, like that very tall, sharp spire, as well as the gargoyles on the edges of the building, it still is created with a clean line and a new approach to that style to make it completely modern. The building also borrows from the Egyptian period with some Art Nouveau-like vine accents. What you're looking at is the a lotus blossom motif, which is very, very reminiscent of an Egyptian element or design motif, accented with Art Nouveau vines. Rockefeller Center has quite a bit going on, but stylistically on the exterior, which is massive and imposing, much like a ziggurat in the Mesopotamian era. Again, that stepped notion towards the top of the building. Of course, New York imposes a bylaw that requires all of the skyscrapers to do that so that sunshine can still infiltrate onto the street level. So all of the buildings have to step in, but of course can have a floor plate that is zero property line to their actual property. And directly incorporating skyscraper style directly into the interior as well, reflecting what is on the exterior. Again, with a very simple geometric look to it, and a nice stylized line to give the accent as opposed to a photorealism on those doors. And then, of course, the carpet designs by Radio City. Inside Radio City Music Hall, it is extremely glamorous. Again, that subdued lighting, the beautiful large murals, the sweeping metallic staircase, all with that imposing interior as well. So this was designed by architect Edward Gerald Stone and interior designer Donald Deskey. And it's a complete break with the traditional ornate Rococo ornament associated with movie palaces at the time. And of course, they incorporate glass, aluminum, chrome, and leather in the ornament for the theater's wall coverings. And of course, a very custom ornate carpet that coordinates with the light fixtures and furniture as well. So the images you are seeing are a complete fluke and magical moment that happened to me in New York. I went into Radio City Music Hall only because I didn't have a lot of time in between a Broadway show I had come out of and another Broadway show that I was going to. So I wanted to see Radio City Music Hall and let them know that I teach history of interiors and architecture, and they gave me a private tour on the spot, which was fantastic. So I got to take these pictures with nobody in the theater, albeit very quickly, which is why they're of poor quality. This actually happens to be the personal apartment of Donald Deskey. So he spent a lot of time at Radio City Music Hall designing the space and gave himself its own apartment, which is fantastic. And you can see again that monumental scale. It's 2 stories high, a lot of wood paneling, a very masculine in decoration. Again, something that's associated with smoking rooms. You can see that the window coverings were floor to ceiling, a lot of use of chrome, and again, very clean lines, very simplistic and masculine. On the photo on the left, you can actually see them transitioning between shows, so the mechanics of the stage behind it, and my 2 little friends that are standing there looking in awe off to the right-hand side of that photo. But what's better is the right-hand photo that shows you the stage lit up, waiting for theatergoers to infiltrate it. And you can see, I guess, that proscenium, that staggered arch all the way down to the stage, really tunneling your focus. But again, with a clean line, it's not a super ornate decoration, which we've seen in a lot of other theaters. Also, there's no bad seat in this house, which is fantastic. And so, again, that really subdued lighting that makes it look like a setting sun. Now, the Great Stage was actually designed by somebody else named Peter Clark. Stage design is a very specific thing, and not all interior designers can do it. So it was meant to resemble a setting sun. And its series of elevators used within the stage itself, as well as behind, backstage, back of the house, was so advanced that the U.S. Navy incorporated identical hydraulic systems when they were constructing their World War II aircrafts. So they studied the system to see how they could make different things work for them. And according to Radio City lore, during the war, government agents guarded the basement to assure that the Navy's technology would not be stolen. So the elevator system was really pioneered by Peter Clark, but was built essentially by Otis Elevators. Although New York City is well known for its Art Deco architecture and certainly pioneered a lot of that movement. There's another area in the US as well, which is in Miami. There's a whole Art Deco district of really beautiful hotels that again um, use that stepped type of architecture to accentuate either their signage or different floors of their hotel, and then incorporate bright colors as well to accentuate their space. The Saarinen House, designed by Eliel Saarinen, who was a very prominent architect during that period, and we're going to see a little bit of his son in later periods, designed this beautiful, beautiful space with geometrical and angular shapes that would really actually be a fantastic insert into today's modern aesthetic as well. It's definitely a timeless space at the Saarinen House. So we see the chrome, glass, shiny fabrics, mirrors and mirror tiles. There's a beautiful contrast between highly polished wood and the glossy black lacquer mixed with satin and furs in the space. Streamlined shapes for the furniture in single pieces rather than suites. And the floors are a polished parquet, which again adds a nice geometrical element to it as well. There's linoleum in the space in abstract designs, black and white checkerboard tiles, and a large rug in a geometric pattern as well. Now, these rugs were often handmade by artists, which is quite rare during this period, or during our period. The lights actually happen to feature female figures holding the ball of the lamp, which is definitely a throwback to Greek antiquity. Chrome, which was a brand new material at the time, was often used heavily with glass that would be etched, sandblasted, or enameled rather than colored. Again, there was a severe love and focus on electricity since the conversion of oil and gas happened. The furniture forms also used the same lines and motifs of Eliel Saarinen's buildings. This space is also a really good example of very, very modern space during the time. So streamlined with curved corners, and all of the inherent color and characteristics of the materials used were allowed to show through. So the wood was not stained a different color than it actually was. It, of course, was just lacquered for performance and also for sheen to kind of reflect with the mirrors and chrome, but essentially stayed true to their natural color. A very beautiful and popular chair during the time that is kind of resembling, at least in a simplistic form, the lotus blossom as well. The side chair that Eliel Saarinen built out of maple and ebony with ochre-colored enamel stripes, and is currently being built by Architectura. Now the Hans chair should look very, very familiar. We just saw Frank Lloyd Wright's barrel chair, so it is very, very similar in nature. More of a crude construction for sure, and less detail and craftsmanship on the Hans chair, but built out of solid mahogany and a leather seat for some added comfort. Now those two chairs, the barrel chair and the Hans chair, often get confused on the exam, so you'll need to know the difference between those. The blue chair by Eliel Saarinen is pretty easy to spot. Also, again, employs that Egyptian style to the chair. Very simple geometric form in that it's square in shape, and then employs those pendentives or triangles that look very Egyptian in nature as well. Eileen Gray was a bit of an anomaly during this time. There were not many furniture designers that were women, nor craftsmen that were women. So she originally began designing lacquer screens that became very popular, and it afforded her the ability to open up her own workshop. Now, her earlier works, which we see in this period, were very Art Deco influenced, like we can see with the smoking table, that gray glass with high chrome accents. And she loved exotic materials and incorporated them into her works with bright colors. But then later, we're going to see her a little bit later, she becomes influenced by Le Corbusier, and her furniture moved towards the De Stijl or movement, which was the Dutch version of Art Nouveau. The early modern movement, which is really sporadic throughout different areas like Europe and North America. Obviously, Europe probably happened upon it earlier than North America did. World War I happens, and Europe is in absolute ruins, so millions are homeless. And that really put a bitter taste in the Europeans' mouths. So they really rejected all styles associated with previous regimes, and became concerned with health, especially buildings that had more light, that were open to outdoors, and they wanted people to work less hours during the week, which seems logical. The Vienna Succession movement was similar to the arts and crafts movement in that it protested the contemporary design of Art Nouveau, even though they still incorporated many curved and vine-like attributes as surface decoration. But that was really their point. They wanted something that was more structural and brought the interiors out in the building, and virtually created something that was an integrated project. Joseph Hoffmann was really the spearhead for this whole succession and set up his own practice in Vienna. He was very much inspired by Mackintosh and the Glasgow School, which again was still part of the Art Nouveau period, but Mackintosh being a bit of an early modernist as well. Joseph Hoffmann carried those ideas over to the Vienna Succession as well.
We've seen this chair before.
His buddies and revolutionary artists
associated with
during that
William
time
Morris
were Otto Wagner and Adolf Loos.
So
and of course, the design somewhat replicates that idea, incorporates a little bit of Mackintosh's geometric, that square geometric pattern and grid. But the difference, of course, is what it is made with. So the Morris chair from the arts and crafts period was built with wood, which was a very popular material during that period. During the Vienna Succession, it was really steel that was seen as a modern movement. So the frame is structural steel, and the seat is plywood. The seat and back and arms are all plywood that is stained. And the back is adjustable, which wasn't always the case with the Morris chair. I'm sure many of you have seen this chair before. It has been replicated many, many times. Joseph Hoffmann's Cubist chair is born out of Cubist design. Now, Cubist design principles are that when you create an object, it can only be captured by showing it from multiple points of view, which is why we see 3D segments within this particular chair, albeit it is a repeated module over and over on the chair, which gives it a unity and a harmony. And Cubist design was really more about fragmented objects, but it still fits the principles. So it's a leather exterior with box-stitched squares. I am quite sure you've also seen the Fledermaus chair a million times as well, as it's been replicated repeatedly. This was designed for Cabaret Fledermaus, which was a theater bar where the Vienna Succession folks socialized. The cabaret was quite small and had a lot of limited space, so it meant that they had to design a chair that could fit within that space, but it needed to be durable, of course, for the type of traffic that rolls through there. It is built out of steam bent beechwood, and then the seat is upholstered, of course, for comfort. Otto Wagner's armchair is also very popular. The difference is that it currently gets reproduced without the aluminum fittings that you see on the exterior of this chair. Now, when you look at the photo on the right-hand side, you can see that those armchairs don't actually fit under the table, which is something that industrial design students have thankfully figured out for us over the years. So it required the aluminum fittings to protect the arm. Of course, that didn't necessarily protect the table. So this was built for the Postal Savings Bank in Vienna and built by the Thonay Company. Mahogany stained solid beech. Again, that beech would be bent wood, so they would steam the wood and bend it into shape and let it dry. And the seat was upholstered in velvet. The De Stijl movement in Holland was such that in World War I, Holland was actually, well, they started out neutral, but people weren't really allowed to leave the country, so they were cut off from any artistic movements outside the rest of the world. And the movement really began as a collaboration between Mondrian and Rietveld. They favored the use of geometric shapes, primary colors, as well as black and white asymmetrical balance. They based their principles on Cubism, which we just learned about with Joseph Hoffman's work. The lines were constrained to vertical and horizontal only, so not a ton of angles with the exception of the red and blue chair that you see there. And what is interesting is that Rietveld actually promoted mass production. He felt it was the only way that furniture could really be afforded by the public, so people were getting upset with all of these craftsman workshops that were only creating custom pieces for those that could afford it. Now, the red and blue chair was designed for the Schroeder House, which you've seen in History of Architecture as well. The black framework makes the red, blue, and yellow components appear like they are floating. The original seat and back were actually just a sheet of plywood, and plywood was a new material at the time. They had figured out how to press wood veneers together with adhesive in a manner that created still a great aesthetic on the exterior, but was not as an expensive material as solid wood was. Also, significantly lighter. In that plywood fashion, the zigzag chair, which is also very popular and is currently in production by Cassina, was developed with laminated elm plywood. However, he uses a dovetail joinery to hold it together along with nuts and bolts. Now, dovetail joinery is not a joinery system that was really lent to the mass production of the Industrial Revolution at the time. It currently is now due to machinery. But for a chair of this nature that has to support a lot of dynamic weight, the dovetail joinery, of course, would have been the best option. So it's really utilizing the concept of positive and negative space for visual effect. Both positive and negative space give you a lovely sense of a light object. It's actually not so light when you try to pull it around, but a light looking object that's simplistic in form. And the horizontal and vertical planes, of course, were meant to be as distinct as possible, so no legs were introduced to this particular piece. In Germany, a modern movement came about from the Bauhaus School. The founder of the Bauhaus School's name was Walter Gropius, who was an architect, German architect, and it was a school that was really dedicated to teaching a broad range of arts and design, like architecture, town planning, advertising, exhibition design, stage design, photography, film, and a new profession, which was industrial design. He wanted to find a common ground between the technical versus the art of design. Art history was specifically excluded, to my horror. They didn't want to reproduce anything from the past, but really develop new ideas. So they experimented with materials and construction to develop what we call the international style. Eventually, this school was closed in 1933 by the Nazi government, and the style seemed commercial and not really appreciated by the common people until a little bit later. Gropius, Mies van der Rohe, Marcel Breuer all immigrated to the U.S. and brought that style with them. Mies van der Rohe became the dean at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and of course, he built the Crown Hall. His student, Bertrand, built, of course, the beautiful Marina building in downtown Chicago, which I'm not sure if you're a Wilco fan, but it's on the cover of Wilco's Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. And they really affected the modern movement in the U.S. After Frank Lloyd Wright. A really popular byproduct of the international style was Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's designs for the Barcelona World Exposition. Now, certainly it's his furniture that we know, but it really came to be because of this pavilion. So let's take a quick look at this pavilion. Very simple in plan. The structure are tiny columns. The partitions are not structural at all, and only really divide space, but he really wanted to keep an open plan. And it is an excellent demonstration of his quote, "Less is more," so not a lot of ornamentation. And he does a great job of uniting technology with design as well. And he keeps those linear forms going, clean lines, and use of shiny materials as well, with linear forms and the band of windows on the exterior. Of course, the furniture from that pavilion stands out and is very heavily reproduced. Even though it is reproduced, it is not conducive to mass production, which is why a lot of the replications still cost quite a bit of money. The special welding required to develop that X form at the bottom of the chair is significant, and also it's a nice throwback to the Egyptian times as well. But we see this chair has elements of cubism as well, with those repeated modules that are 3D in nature, to be viewed from all angles. The MR chairs are really great examples of when very famous architects recognize systemic problems in society, and certainly Chicago is not does not shy away from systemic problems throughout that city. So the MR chairs were actually designed for low-income families. They wanted them to be affordable. Of course, now they're produced through Knoll, so they are certainly not affordable to the average human, but they were designed to be lightweight for easy movement as well. So just a chrome steel tubing with a leather or a woven chair seat and back. His Bruno chair was also very popular. It was developed for the Tugendhat house. Tugendhat is Tugendhat, which is in the city of Brno in the Czech Republic. And it was designed again similar to the Barcelona furniture, to create that harmonious relationship between the architecture and the furniture. Now, originally it was a steel tubing as well, but currently Knoll has modified it slightly to that flat steel accent, which actually looks a lot better and more substantial. But again, they charge a fortune for it as well. So it's shown in leather in the image, but they also produced it in a lower cost alternative with an upholstered seat. Marcel Breuer had a lot of famous chairs as well. The best known one is the Seska chair, which is also produced by Knoll, and I think every design student in the 80s and 90s had this type of chair knockoff as their kitchen table and chairs. Again, Breuer was a student of Bauhaus. He also emigrated to the US, and he named this chair after his daughter, Francesca. He used natural materials in juxtaposition to the tubular steel, which was considered modern. So he has the cane back with the beechwood married with the tubular steel. It was easily mass-produced once they figured out tube bending equipment to easily create these shapes and put these chairs together. Most famous chair happens to be the Wassily chair that was designed for his friend and fellow artist Wassily Kandinsky, who was a very famous painter. And they were inspired by his bicycle handlebars, actually. Looks very much like a bicycle handlebar. The seat in the back and arm material are usually leather. It can also be canvas. Now, Kandinsky and Breuer taught at Bauhaus at the same time. So Breuer actually became the head of the cabinet making shop while Kandinsky handled the art side of things. And most of Kandinsky's art was painted in abstract expressionism, which moved away from realistic forms to spiritual realms. And when you look at the chair, even though we're looking at something that's very geometric in shape, it is not a traditional chair and moves away from traditional seating. So we're looking at a bunch of pieces assembled together to create a harmonic look. And it doesn't necessarily always read as a chair, which subscribes to the abstract expressionism as well. Le Corbusier is a pretty popular guy as well. His real name is Charles-Edouard Jeanneret, who was a French modernist architect. He was very influenced by Joseph Hoffmann, who he met, which is from the Vienna succession. And he worked at the same architecture firm as Walter Gropius and Mies van der Rohe. He also took the time to learn about Frank Lloyd Wright's philosophies as well, so liked the use of solids and geometric shapes. He collaborated with his artist friend Amédée, which is Amedee, Ozenfant, which is Ozenfant, for a new theory which was called purism. Now, the rules to purism were a simplification of design, no ornamentation, and architecture should be as efficient as a factory assembly line. So it should be easy to put these spaces together if you keep it simple. He also designed furniture to coordinate with his interiors and to ensure a lack of ornamentation. And he was very successful. The Basculin chair was developed for Villa Savoye. Again, using that chrome-plated tubular steel frame technology and a tiltable backrest. The only real decoration was really the pony hide seat. And as a side note, pony hide makes the worst material for chairs or any seating ever, because the tiny, fine little hairs from the pony hide transfer onto your clothes, and they're very sharp and they're stabby. So a terrible material to use as a seat, but attractive in its decorations, certainly. He liked to keep his furniture simplistic as well. The LC2 Petite Confort, there's also the Grand Confort as well, but the Petite design for smaller spaces really kept it simple. So there's a bottom tray in which the cushions literally just sit upon, and the steel tube holds them in place. The chaise lounge, also really popular, has this simple cradle at the bottom. It's wood, and the steel tube lounge portion adjusts within that, so tilts up and down on it. Sadly, he also used the pony skin upholstery on that with a leather headrest, but of course better in the leather option for sure. what's great about the Ternant armchair with the LC6 table, which is built by Cassina, is that the table base is height adjustable from 27 to 29 inches, which is something that didn't exist actually at that time. He employs a steel base, and the Ternant chair was actually designed by Charlotte Perriand, who was Korb's wife, and she joined his architecture firm in 1927. It's a revolving chair, which is great, so that you can pull your chair up to the table, and when you want to get out, you just turn the chair and instead of moving it back and forth. And because steel is cold and hard, she added the padded components to the steel frame to make it more comfortable. I told you we would see Eileen Gray again because she was influenced by Korb, and here she is with her Lotus sofa. The Lotus sofa, as well as the Bibendum chair that we'll see in the next slide, is directly attributed to Eileen Gray, and she developed it for fashion designer Susan Talbot at her Parisian apartment called Rue de Lota. So that is why this sofa is called the Lotus sofa. Again, simplification with pieces. The end pieces are black lacquered wood cases on casters, and the cushions are loose and down-filled. So all of those parts can actually pull apart from each other and be assembled elsewhere if need be to conserve on space. The Bibendum chair, again, of course, developed for Susan Talbot, which is a little bit more of an opulent take and even, dare I say, a Victorian-esque approach to a modern aesthetic. It's very puffy and stuffed, but still employs that steel tube construction and simple, clean lines. The Transat chair happens to be one of my favorites of hers. It's similar to Korb's chaise lounge. It is a reclining chair that has a adjustable headrest. The upholstery is leather and uses a lacquer wood frame with some very industrial metal fittings, which are exposed. You can see some of the great furniture on these particular websites. Of course, all of the websites of all of the manufacturers, Cassina, Knoll, Thone, it all shows on their websites as well. You can also see the horrific prices of these pieces. And then, of course, if you ever find yourself in New York City, you must go to the MoMA. If not to see the art, then to definitely go to the gift shop, one of the best gift shops in the world. And you can see a lot of the modern classic furniture within that gift shop, and even buy some of the little miniatures that exist there as well.